everyone. Welcome and welcome back to the Gilded Hour podcast. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Mabel.
And welcome to our 5th episode. We're already on episode number 5.
We got a whole hand going.
Yay! And we're over halfway, well, at the end of this podcast episode, we'll be over halfway through our first season, and which of course corresponds to the Gilded Age first season, which had 9 episodes. And this episode is about charity, which the episode 5 of the Gilded Age is called Charity Has Two Functions. I would say after researching this episode, charity has more than 2 functions. But we'll talk about why they called it that. And we're going to talk about Clara Barton on this episode too.
She is my casual hero. In 5th grade, I had to pick someone to dress like and give a presentation as, and I chose Clara Barton. I don't remember anything that I said about it because it was 5th grade.
No way.
But she was my little hero when I was 10.
Do you remember why? Like why at 10 you were drawn to her?
I wanted to be like in some kind of medical field. It's because I loved the X-Files. This goes deep. I love the X-Files, and Scully was a medical doctor. And so when I was looking at people in history, Clara Barton, first female in the war, I was like, yeah, she's hitting all the things that I love. I'm going to be her for my project. So, and it was one of those things. It was like a museum. So people would have to come up and touch me on the shoulder. And I would say, I'm Clara Barton. It was very fun. It was very cute.
That's so cool. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
So this brought back memories.
Did you do it like a report on her or anything else?
Yeah, we had to do like an essay, and I had to dress like her. So my grandmother had been a nurse in the 50s. So I grabbed her nurse's uniform and dressed like her. I had like the white stockings and the little hat and everything. And I put like a Red Cross on it, which I was violating like the Geneva Convention because you're not allowed to put the Red Cross on anything.
They might forgive you for educational purposes.
I think so. I hope so.
Classroom.
So yeah, so it was really fun. I had to like give facts about Clara Barton to anybody that came my way and like touched my shoulder that wanted to know facts. So I don't remember what any of those facts were today, but I'm sure the show covers it.
Well, yeah, actually, yes and no. I found when researching this episode that her life was filled with so many events. She did so many things that I can't believe she only lived one lifetime.
Yeah.
Because, and we don't even have time to talk about it all.
No, she did a ton.
I unfortunately had to pick and choose a few things to talk about, but it's just incredible. And in fact, when I post this podcast episode with the corresponding notes or blog post, I will put a link to a timeline I found of her life.
Ooh.
And you go to this timeline and you just like keep scrolling. And you're like, how is this one person? How did she fit this in?
Wow. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask, but she helped after the war reunite families with missing soldiers, yes. Right? Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
I remember a little bit.
You do. So we'll do kind of an overview of her life, but it's really incredible. And as usual, I'll post this podcast episode with some sources for anyone else who wants to go read a little bit more.
Beautiful.
But we'll start off, as usual, with our Gilded Age episode summary, so we know why we're talking about Clara Barton and charity in general. This was definitely charity was a theme, especially through season 1, I noticed. We'll talk about it in a second.
We'll talk about it, because I have some thoughts about that, too.
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts, yes. So I think this will be a good conversation.
I think so.
In episode 5, Aurora, Bertha, Marion, and Tom Riggs travel to hear Clara Barton speak at a Red Cross branch opening in upstate New York. So Peggy accompanies them so she can write an article for the Globe. She's also kind of an informal chaperone to Marion at Agnes's request. And Miss Barton notes during this trip how wealthy people use charity to enhance their social standing. So incidentally, Bertha writes a huge check for the Red Cross. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Also, in the Gilded Age drama world, we have Tom and Marion who kiss in a quiet hall in the hotel during their trip. So yeah, Agnes was right to have Peggy chaperone. Poor Peggy.
Yes.
Peggy also confides to Marion that she was in love once, but her father disapproved of the match. And in this scene, it's also important. We kind of talked about last episode, there was a scene between Marion and Peggy in episode 4, and Marion apologizes to Peggy for her earlier assumptions about Peggy's family.
Good apologizing. Good job. She recognized that was a bad moment.
And also necessary if I think the show wanted to build a believable friendship between those two. They kind of needed to.
Yes, agreed.
They need to acknowledge 100%. That. Meanwhile, Agnes Van Ryn's lady's maid Armstrong visits her mother, who's sick and confined to bed in a small tenement apartment. This gives us a really brief glimpse into another side of Gilded Age New York City. And definitely one of the common criticisms of this show is that it glamorizes the wealthy. I don't think Julian Fellowes is. He would admit, yes, of course it does, because that's kind of his brand.
Yes. He's not shy about that at all whatsoever.
This is not a show to go to if you want, like, gritty reality. However, I will say I think I appreciated them putting a bit of effort in trying to show, some other things that were going on.
Yeah.
Other Gilded Age drama, Oscar recruits Bertha's lady's maid Turner to basically spy on the Russells and Bertha's plans for Gladys.
So funny. It's just so funny.
Basically makes the two of them friends, which is, anyway, to be continued later on.
TBC.
Bertha disapproves of Gladys's suitor, Archie Baldwin, because she has, quote unquote, bigger plans for her daughter. The Russells invite him to dinner, and then after dinner, Archie speaks to George about his intentions with Gladys. The actor seems to be, like, portraying a fairly nice young man, and he seems to genuinely like Gladys, but clearly George is carrying out his wife's wishes to rid Archie as a suitor when he issues Archie an ultimatum. He must accept a lucrative job with a well-known banker and stop pursuing Gladys, or he'll never work in finance again. So Archie is understandably shaken and intimidated. He accepts the offer and reluctantly leaves. And then George's right-hand man, Richard Clay, arrives at the end of dinner to inform George that a company train has derailed. George and Bertha immediately prepare to address the incident and, save their professional and social face. And also how convenient that they just donated a large amount of money to the Red Cross when they need it.
Hey, Clara, can you come here a second, Clara? We need something.
That's pretty much what George says. He's like, by the way, can you call up your new bestie at the Red Cross? Thanks. So amazing. Points out some interesting little aspects of charity back then. Let's talk about charities of the Gilded Age.
Let's do it.
It was interesting to look into why there were a couple of organizations that were formed at this time, and it makes a lot of sense if you think about the context of what was going on at the time. This was post-Civil War U.S. You had many people moving to cities for jobs, so there was this industrialization happening. And, of course, there was mass immigration to the U.S., so you had a lot of people arriving who didn't necessarily know how to get a job or fit in right away to their new surroundings.
Right.
So, obviously, if you think about it, when people move to cities or they are moving to a new country, they are also losing their old family networks. So, in the old world, they would have had like communities that they had lived in for generations that would help them if they fell on hard times. And even if you think about the U.S. before this era of industrialization, most people lived on farms and in small farming communities where they would have maybe been closer to their neighbors. And 200 years, they had some sort of structure in that way too.
Right.
Yeah.
This is also Clara Barton. The Red Cross also helped when Black people started migrating north and west. The Red Cross actually really helped to get people into housing and to have enough food for their families. So the legacy continued on. And I think yeah, we're just seeing the foundations in this episode, I think, starting.
Yeah, it was just a time of mass change, mass upheaval. There were good changes and bad changes, but whenever changes happen, you've got to address, you need some sort of structure to address them.
And Clara, she knew.
And in my opinion, she knew how to do it better than a lot of other organizations and a lot of other people. So I'm kind of jumping ahead. That's the last thing on my notes is, was Clara Barton more effective at charity? And the answer is yes. So, spoiler alert, you don't have to listen to this podcast now. I think she was, at least. But yeah, I was curious to kind of see what else existed, because I know I came across this topic actually not when I was researching the US, but I did my master's thesis on a topic related to Argentina. It was Argentina in the 1940s and 50s, but they, like the US in the late 19th century, they had the same thing where they had really wealthy oligarchs, and they had working classes and lower classes and immigration and people moving to the cities. And they had the same thing in the US where, like, the wealthy people controlled the charity. So I remember I ran into this in the context, actually, of Eva Peron, who in the 1940s and 50s, she was really outspoken against this older model of charity. She said it was really demeaning and demoralizing for the working classes and for the poor to, just have basically charity bestowed upon them by wealthy oligarchs who were just giving money to improve their image. Now, that's a whole thing to unpack, which I don't have time for, because Eva Peron was super controversial and still is to this day. So that's a whole other story. But I ran into it, and it was very interesting to see then, the same thing was happening in the US, where wealthy people were just kind of giving money and making themselves feel better. We saw that in the episode where they go to the charity bazaar and George shuts it down. But basically it's to help women and young children and prevent them from becoming prostitutes, I think. I don't know. It was a weird charity. It was a strange charity. So it was very odd kind of ideas, I guess, that you had wealthy people had these ideas of what charity should be. But basically, in the 1870s and 1880s, some kind of charity movement started to be organized. You had one that was called the Charity Organization Society that was created because this organization felt like, charities were unregulated, they were unsupervised. And so the goal of this was like a scientific basis to help uplift and cure families of poverty. It wouldn't 100% be the way we would approach it today, I don't think, but it was kind of the early start to modern day social work. So social cases, for example, and looking at families and looking at how to help an individual family.
Right.
And then there was also something called the settlement movement. So this was the one that was founded by Jane Addams. I remember learning about this in high school. I don't know if you remember.
It doesn't sound familiar to me. Huh?
But I'd long forgotten. It was founded in the U.S. by a woman named Jane Addams. She had traveled through Europe, and she was inspired by something she saw in England. And it was called the settlement movement there as well. So basically, the idea was to establish something called settlement houses in poorer urban areas. And that was mostly to help newcomers to the U.S., so immigrants adapt to the new country, and to also help like children transition from their parents' old world culture to the newer U.S. culture. So
got it. Okay.
Because a lot of volunteers were middle and upper class settlement workers who actually lived and worked closely in these houses to work with the newcomers. And the most famous was actually called Chicago's Hull House. So I'm going down a rabbit hole myself after this podcast. I'm so curious. And I think the show has given brief nods to this kind of structure, because in the third season, it was so brief. It was just like they mentioned Marion working with, I think, women or men and women who had just arrived and didn't speak English, and so she was teaching them English. And it sounds to me like she may have been teaching at something like this kind of organization. And then the final sort of big, I guess you could say, charity movement I saw was the Working Girls Clubs, they were called. So this was a structure by which the upper class established clubs specifically for working class women in cities. They were spaces that provided like meals, library, potential places to stay, special classes, and so forth.
It's interesting because, like, in school, I didn't learn about any of this. It's just you hear about the immigrant experience was so hard, and they were all poor, and it was just bad. And you never hear about the things that were actually trying to help them. You never hear about that.
There were certainly resources and efforts being made. And
I realize it wasn't perfect, but it still would have been nice to know that these things existed before, today.
I know. So. I know. That's the strange thing about the way we teach history is we act like everything happening now is brand new.
Yeah.
But
it's not.
With these kinds of organizations, you realize that these are old ideas. Like, people were not stupid in the past, and they had really solid organizations, and even if they weren't perfect then, a lot of them kind of rolled into what we have now. So
that's true. Very, very true.
And so anyway, these working girls clubs, they were a bit controversial. Modern scholars don't love them because they said that a lot of the people who organized them were organizing them just so that the working girls, didn't fall into disrepute. Like, they didn't go out and spend their paycheck on drinking. And so there was kind of like a moral, I guess, undertone to the whole thing.
Right.
But I don't know. Glancing through it, I'm like, that's kind of a harsh critique because I'm even someone who moved to the city at a young age and started working. And I'm like, I would have loved an organization like this, even if they had moral undertones, right?
I mean, I know, like, sometimes you have to mold yourself into being what somebody else wants, but if it means shelter and food and consistent resources, okay. Sure, while I'm trying to get by, let's, okay.
Yeah, and just the networking with other women, too, who are working, right? Yeah. Like, we lack that now, honestly. With everyone working from home, we're kind of lacking organizations like this.
We are.
So some interesting things happening at the time. There were some, of course, problems with charity at the time. As we've seen on the Gilded Age, I mean, it was clearly a way for middle and upper class women to occupy their time that wasn't controversial. So, like, they couldn't go to work. But if they wanted to get out of the house and participate in public life, helping with a charity was kind of their only choice. So it became like their job in a way. And
gotta do something.
You gotta do something. I do think there is an extension to today because you still see, like, many volunteers, many caretaker roles in public life are still women.
Yep.
There was that. There were some interclass tension within charities. So again, this is kind of what I ran into actually in my research in Argentina, where you had the elite women projecting what they thought working class and poorer women would want or would need or should have. So there was always like this mismatch, and there was the potential for condescension. And then, of course, like, it was condescending in the sense that it made wealthy elite women the object of aspiration, right?
Exactly.
So not always the best. You do have a lot of women who worked in hospitals and tried to help out in hospitals. I guess I read something that said this could cause tension because, again, you had, like, upper class women who thought that immigrant mothers, for example, didn't know how to parent, but really it was just like a cultural mismatch.
Right. I think there were a lot of cultural mismatches at the time. And then there was also the sentiment of, we want to help you, but not too many of you, because then you're going to take our jobs and we're going to be struggling. So, yeah.
And then, of course, when you look back at things that were aimed to help young female workers, for example, they tended to help them get meals and a safe place to stay, which was all good, but they never really addressed issues like working hours or wages, which, again, we're still struggling with how to address that today.
Yeah. God, yeah.
Two other things. This is where we get into what Bertha's kind of doing. A lot of wealthy women did use charities as a way to social climb, because Bertha couldn't really buy her way into high society, but she kind of could, like, by buying her way into a charity board, she could get into that circle with the other wealthy elites. And it was like she had to force them to accept her, because here she was with her big paycheck.
Yeah. That it just reminds me of, like, I went somewhere and I was doing some kind of memorial reading, and I, like, teared up and I cried. And then afterwards I was telling people, like, oh, I cried, I was emotional. I remember my dad was like, don't say that, because then it looks like you're just crying for attention and, like, you want people to acknowledge. Yeah. And so that's what this reminded me of, is, like, they don't actually care as much as you want them to care. It's just all about money. Yeah. It's just, charity is the vehicle for just wanting your money. So I guess, are you like, well, at least we have the money, that's fine. I don't care if your heart's not really in it. Thank you for the money, though. Yeah. I just wondered deep down, like, what were Clara Barton's, like, real thoughts? Like, what was she really thinking when these wealthy women were just like, here's money so I can be in good social standing, not because I actually care.
So my impression of Clara Barton, spoiler alert, this is just my interpretation. I feel like because she set up such successful organizations, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, because she was so successful at setting up lasting, meaningful organizations, I think she was a very, very wise businesswoman, and she knew she couldn't set up those organizations without funding. And she just knew, I'm assuming she knew the reality was that, she did need those big fat paychecks. And if they came from someone like Bertha, who was fictional, but there were other women like her, then fine. No problem.
Who cares?
Right? Because, money, come on. Yeah, money is
money.
Like, I think she was realistic.
Yeah, you're right.
And one other thing that the show hasn't addressed so far, I found, but is kind of, actually you see it sort of mentioned nowadays, if you look into current events. Of course, charities were also a way to divert money away from being taxed. And essentially, this kept control of the money and how it was spent in the hands of the elites and the wealthy. So this was actually, like, described by Andrew Carnegie himself in 1889. He wrote an essay called Wealth. I haven't read it. I've read a summary. It sounds awful. I didn't really feel like reading it. Essentially, it makes the case for keeping money within, like, the uber wealthy elite's control, because he says inequality actually leads to the progress of the race. So, okay, there you have obvious tones of racism, imperialism, colonialism sort of attitudes. He justifies the power of industrialists like himself against calls for taxation, because there wasn't taxation at that time.
Yeah.
Or income tax the way we have it now. So he justifies it. He says that without taxation, it's going to result in better wages for workers, because the wealthy know how to pay their workers really well, and the government doesn't actually know how to redistribute resources. So he made his case for keeping money within the power of the elites, and then giving to charities was them saying, see, we do know how to spend it.
Okay.
If you don't have to look too hard to see some parallels today.
Yeah, no, you definitely don't. It's right. It's very obvious.
All right, Clara Barton. Let's talk about her.
Yes, please. I'm so interested if like you'll ping my memory. Like you'll say something like, "Oh yeah, I remember that from my
Yeah, and
project."
I do feel like I'm not doing her justice here because, like I said, all I really have is like a highlights list of her life. But I want to read a whole book about her. I mean,
Yeah, I would love to find a good book.
and honestly, someone could make a TV series about her life, and I would watch that. I think that would be amazing. And
There are so many women in history that deserve their own TV shows. So many.
yeah,
We're never going to get them, but they're out there.
yeah, I know, I know. I mean, I love the fluff and fun of the Gilded Age, but then when you're like, wait, why are we talking about Bertha and not Clara Barton? Like, what a
Yeah,
book,
and
maybe.
there are even more interesting people in history than like they're just very interesting people, women in
Yeah.
history that you wouldn't even know unless someone like brings them up in some niche conversation.
Well, here we are. Here's our niche
Here we
conversation.
are. We're doing it.
Okay, Clara Barton was born in Massachusetts, so she was born in the Northeast. She actually spent a lot of time when she was young caring for her brother who was ill. So I don't know if she was the eldest daughter, but eldest daughter energy there. It sounded like she was responsible for that at home. She did attend school, so she attended a school called the Liberal Institute in Clinton, New York. And then she actually became a teacher and she established a school called the Free School in New Jersey.
Okay.
At some point, she quit teaching when she discovered that another teacher, who was a man, was earning twice her salary. So, yeah, talk about, I mean,
Of course.
how many decades of this do we need to go through?
It started and it never stops.
Just
And that's a little depressing.
I know. After teaching, she was hired on at the U.S. Patent Office as a recording clerk. Apparently, this was kind of a record-breaking role for her because she was one of the first women to work in government. She was actually paid the same as her male colleagues, so that is a perk, usually, of a government job. It's pretty, cut and dry how much you get paid. But this only lasted for a year. A
God.
Secretary of Interior opposed women working in government, and he ended up demoting her and reducing her salary. And then her position was eliminated entirely. So
Wow.
I found another source that said at this time she was also pretty outspoken about being anti-slavery. So that made her controversial in Washington, D.C.
Of course it did.
Of course it did. Another source said that could also explain why she was demoted, but I think we can remember her as being on the right side of history with all of that.
Yes, I think so.
She did earn back a lesser role in government when Lincoln was elected, so she did kind of get a job back eventually. But at that point, she was in Washington, D.C., and the Civil War began. So she started working to help with the war efforts. She began transporting supplies to Union soldiers. And she also volunteered at the Washington Infirmary to care for wounded soldiers.
Okay.
She was pretty active during this time. Like, again, I'm super glossing over everything she did during the war, which was incredible. But most notably, she worked to deliver supplies to battlefields in Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina. And as she was delivering supplies, she was also caring for wounded soldiers. From what I saw, it also seemed really focused on community efforts too, like making sure civilians had supplies and making sure, there were healthy living conditions. So just my impression from what I've read about her, she was pretty holistic in the sense that she was looking around at the fuller picture.
She was looking long term.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, and looking out for everyone.
Yeah.
In the Battle of Antietam, she encountered overworked surgeons who were trying to make bandages out of corn husks. So thankfully, she had arrived with real bandages.
Whew, gosh. You know, she reminds me a little bit of Claire Fraser, just coming in with her more modern things. Let me fix it for you.
And I have to say, war history just isn't my favorite. I love history, but once you start reading about wars, it's really brutal conditions.
Yeah.
This is a tangent, but I watched a YouTube video many years ago of this guy who reviews MRE. So these are like soldiers.
Oh, I love that guy. Is that the guy that's like, he eats them?
Yes.
He like tries
Steve.
Yes, Matt. Yes.
Steve
MRE.
Yeah. MRE 1989, I think he is.
And he'll be like, that was a good hiss.
He has an episode where he ate a Civil War era ration, which was just really hard tack, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Like, basically a cracker. He did. Yeah. He ate it and reviewed it, and people were like, "What?" Like,
I love that channel. I binged that channel like last year or something. It's so amazing. I went down a rabbit hole.
It's a great channel, and it's fantastic if you love history because it's history through food. It's incredible.
Yes,
it's like a time capsule of food. Anyway, that was a tangent, but all that to say, yeah, Civil War soldiers were living off of really horrendous conditions and eating just like hard crackers that have survived till now to have a guy on YouTube review them.
Oh my gosh.
So Clara arrived at the Battle of Antietam. She really organized there. She performed first aid, she carried water, she prepared food, and she just did a lot of things at that battle along with many others. I did read she actually self-funded a lot of her travel and a lot of her activities during the Civil War. Even though she self-funded a lot of these activities during the Civil War, she later testified in front of Congress about the conditions during the Civil War. And later on, she was also reimbursed by Congress for her activities. So she did get paid back by the American government. Clara Barton did write, and she recorded some of her activities. So this was something... I'm going to read like a little excerpt, because I thought it was kind of evocative of what she experienced during the Civil War. So she wrote, "We have captured one fort, Gregg, and one Charnel House, I think it's pronounced, Wagner. And we have built one cemetery, Morris Island, the 1,000 little sand hills that in the pale moonlight are 1,000 headstones, and the restless ocean waves that roll and break up on the whitened beach sing an eternal requiem to the toll-worn gallant dead who sleep beside."
Wow. She had a way with words.
She did. She wasn't exactly on vacation doing all these things.
No, and in fact, in this episode, we got a good speech from her, and she speaks like she's obviously a very well-educated woman who knows what she is talking about. And she wasn't just putting on face, like she wasn't doing it just to look good, just to be popular, to get favor. She really, really was invested in this and wanted to help. And there just weren't a lot of people putting themselves on the line for people, no matter what you look like, who you are, where you've been. All I want to do is help you. So I don't think we got that a lot in history. And I really, the more you talk about her, and especially after reading that poem, like now I'm just like, I really, really want a good book about her.
I know. I think that's really well put. And that transitions nicely to some of her post-Civil War activities. So after the war, very importantly, as you mentioned earlier, she helped prepare formerly enslaved people for their lives of freedom, which I'm sure that's a whole topic unto itself.
Yeah.
Like how do you transition people during that time, which is incredible, and what an effort that must have entailed. And then she worked to locate missing soldiers by establishing the Office of Missing Soldiers under President Lincoln.
Not too long ago, they just rediscovered that office. I don't know if you saw that in the news. Yeah, but they were going to demolish that whole building. And then they figured out what it was, that it was Clara Barton's old office for finding missing soldiers. Yeah.
Which is incredible. Again, important work. I read that she traveled a lot to do that work, which is quite interesting. She traveled into Georgia, of course, where there were prisons that had held Union soldiers, and therefore a lot of unmarked graves. Quite interesting there. And then finally, after all of these Civil War era efforts, she had poor health. I didn't ever run across exactly what was wrong with her health, but she went to Europe to regain her health, as one does. Good for her. I think well-deserved in her case.
Hey, go for
Why
it.
not? And that's where she learned about the Red Cross. So the Red Cross itself had been established in Geneva in 1864. The Red Cross was a movement that had the goal to provide neutral aid to anyone injured in combat. So it was started by a man who had tried to help after a really, really particularly bloody war. During the war where, like, Italy was trying to reunify. And so, anyway, I am not great at understanding the Napoleonic era wars.
Me either.
But it was during that time. And so I guess conditions in Europe during these battles were quite brutal as well. And so this was a gentleman who had started the Red Cross to provide neutral aid and, you know, help anyone who was wounded, which is obviously important. And we carry on that tradition to this day. So obviously Clara Barton, this caught her attention when she was over there. And she during, you know, this restful vacation where she was trying to restore her health, she volunteered with them. Of course she did. She actually helped during the Franco-Prussian War, which, intense.
So many wars.
It's incredible. So at last she returned to the U.S., and this is where your comment that she had an amazing way with words must have come into play, because she must have been an amazing public speaker, writer, everything else, because she started to write essays and pamphlets, she started to give lectures, and she started to drum up interest in the U.S. for bringing a branch of the Red Cross over across the ocean.
Very nice.
She eventually met with President Hayes, and then finally in 1881, the American Association of the Red Cross was formed, and she was elected president of the organization. So, you know, kind of enter that era that we're seeing on the Gilded Age.
Right, so we're sliding right into that. Okay. For some reason, like, in my mind, Clara Barton was just always Red Cross and never one. And I will apologize to my 5th grade teacher if she did teach this, but I would almost be willing to bet no conversation about a man starting the Red Cross ever. I did not know that at all. Like, I didn't know that it wasn't something that started here. It wasn't Clara Barton's full idea. So this is brand new information to me.
It started in Europe, and to be fair, like, a lot of these, kind of what I went over earlier too, a lot of the ideas about charity, and I would say not just charity itself, but just organizing people, organizing communities, also grew out of Europe at this time period. Because, face it, like, they were encountering some of the same exact things.
Yeah, it's true.
That were happening in the Americas. It wasn't so different. You had people moving around, you had industrialization, you unfortunately still had a lot of war going on, a lot of land dispute. Of course, I'm thinking back to my history class, and you unfortunately, there was a lot of wartime technology that was creating incredibly, I don't want to say dangerous war. I guess war has always been dangerous, but when you think about fighting with muskets and guns and, you know, increasing technology on that front, the kind of response to help the wounded also had to change. There's so much we take for granted now that we're like, of course there's the Red Cross that goes to help when civilians get caught up in a war or when there's a natural disaster or whatever happens. But this was an era where that didn't exist. And I guess with increasing globalization, right, we had to organize, come up with something.
We're capable of this.
Yeah, we are capable of figuring things out. So she brought the Red Cross to the U.S., and then in 1882, the U.S. ratified the Geneva Conventions. So those are obviously still in place to this day. Protect those wounded by war. And she ended up working with the Red Cross until 1904. I think this is also the era following the Geneva Convention you started to see the Red Cross kind of spread to other parts of the world as well. And So, incredibly, Clara Barton did not stop. At this point, I believe she was starting to get closer to her 70s.
Wow.
In age.
About how old is she in when we see her in the Gilded Age?
So Clara Barton was born in 1821. So
Okay.
she would have been in her 60s in the Gilded Age show. And then, so once we inch towards the 1900s, she's getting closer to, she'll be in her 70s. And she volunteered in Cuba during the Spanish-American War.
Okay, Clara.
By the way, the amount that she traveled, also incredible.
Yeah, that's a lot for that time. I mean, and travel was not easy then.
No, not at all. Even over land, when you talk about her going into areas of the South after the Civil War, like that must have been incredibly daunting.
Yeah, had to be, yeah.
So she worked to promote women's suffrage, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And then she actually retired as president of the Red Cross in 1904. So you would think that, Clara Barton, she is now, 1904 would be 83. Okay, yeah. So at 83, she retired from the Red Cross. And instead
what
of
a woman. Oh my gosh, I have such a crush on her all over again.
No, but wait a second. She didn't stop. She didn't stop. She actually established the National First Aid Association.
Wow.
And she became president of that. And the point of that organization was to help Americans be prepared for emergencies. So, wow.
She did
she was involved
so much.
I know, incredible. So, as far as I could find, she more or less worked up until she passed away at age 91 in 1912. So,
man,
what a life.
What month in 1912? Pre or post Titanic? I don't know why that's so important to me.
Everything in our modern mind is like, when did the Titanic happen? Like,
for me, honestly, like with this, I ask that all the time. Pre or post Titanic? What are we talking about here? I don't know why, but
strangely, it was April 12th, 1912.
No way.
She passed away.
Okay, all right. Interesting. I mean, that means literally nothing, but
well, that's when the Titanic set sail.
Yeah, so she was alive long enough to see this wonderful, unsinkable ship. I imagine had she been alive and a little bit more spry and that happened, she would have been one of the first to try and help the people that were coming in off of was it Carpathia?
Yeah, can you imagine, 91, she's like,
I bet if she could have, I bet you if she could have, she would have, because that's just the kind of person it seemed like she was.
Yeah, I completely agree. So she did pass away in Maryland. She passed away from pneumonia, so kind of...
That sounds about right for the time frame, truly.
Yeah.
For an old woman, yeah.
So just incredible life.
I really loved learning more about her.
I think she wasn't the only one, but looking at someone like her, you start to see that, at least in my opinion, and what I took away from it, was she not only helped people, but she kind of established a framework and brought an organization to the United States that would allow for the help and the assistance to continue really long term.
Yeah.
It had this balance of having an international structure and, it was an established organization, and that allowed her to... she was a helpful human being during her lifetime, but her legacy is more than just like her time period when she was alive. Her legacy is also like to this day. She furthered that organization and brought it to the U.S. and, made sure that she was setting things up for long-term success, basically.
And we still know her name today. I mean, that is a legacy. That is legacy. I think that she would be very proud of anytime her name is invoked and the Red Cross is used.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a lot about her, and again, I'll include some links to the sources I used, but I really just skimmed the surface.
Yeah, there's so much.
So that's all I have for this episode. And I'm so glad that you had dressed as Clara Barton when you were young.
I wish I had a picture of it. I'll have to ask my dad if he has any pictures of that. That is it for this podcast episode. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you tune in next time. We will be going over episode 6, Heads Have Rolled for Less. Until then, have a great week, everybody.
thank you for listening to the Gilded Hour podcast on YouTube. If you are interested in our future episodes, be sure to subscribe. And if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like and comment below with any of your thoughts. It helps our podcast grow. We also have our podcast available for free to listen to or download on our website at gildedhourpodcast.com.